Good morning, everybody. Welcome to, I think this is like the 48th edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at Hawk Blogger and even recently at Instagram as well. Hawk Blogger there as well. And a little bit late this morning. Originally it was going to start at 7:15, and then I just had this idea that I thought visual aids might be helpful for this show because we're going to go over a lot of information. I don't know if it's going to be helpful or not, but I decided to take the time to do it. And so it took a little extra and then went a little past when I reset the time. But this is why, if you don't already, click subscribe, click the bell to get notified, and you will know. You will know when this show is going to go live, and I'll keep you up to date. It is a beautiful, gorgeous Friday here in the Pacific Northwest. I hope you all have plans to get out and feel the sun on your face because we don't get enough of it here. And this is going to be a picture perfect Friday in the PNW. Personally, I am going to be, after this, I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to hop in the car and drive down to Portland, hit up my friends. We're going to go see Pearl Jam in concert tonight, have a few drinks beforehand, and then I'm going to drive back tomorrow. And Sunday, Mother's Day, of all things, my wife was like, we should go to a Mariners game. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, that'd be fun. It's like, all right. So Mother's Day is almost seeming like a Father's Day. We're going to go to the Mariners game on Sunday. Hopefully it's watchable. That team's so frustrating. Oh my god. It's so frustrating to be a Mariners fan. But who knows? Tonight, Brian Wu gets his first start of the year. I'm looking forward to him hopefully pitching well, and God knows we need it because the bats aren't helping. So I wanted to talk about today, the topic I wanted to cover. If you didn't see it yesterday, I highly recommend you go back and check out the interview I did with Trey Brown yesterday. Already was a fan, left that conversation a bigger fan, genuine, sincere guy, excellent athlete. If you don't know, he's a 4'4", 40 guy, 39-inch vert guy. I mean, he's a great athlete, and I think a very good player who has not reached his potential. And so as I was talking to Trey and even a little bit before, I was just really, as soon as they drafted two corners in the draft this year, the cornerback position has come into focus because what are you going to do with all of these corners on the roster? And I hadn't thought about this ahead of time, but let me see if I can find it real quick. Roster. Yeah. Okay. Let's do this. I think this is the latest info I had. The average number of cornerbacks kept on the roster since 2010, and I don't have 2023 baked into this, I don't think, but the average number is 5.5. Since Pete Carroll and John Schneider have been here, 5.5. So either 5 or 6 is a fair number of corners to be thought of to be kept on the roster. And I think depending on how you clarify which type of player some of these are, Kobe Bryant, is he a cornerback? Does he count as a cornerback on the roster? Does he count as a safety on the roster? Some of those guys are a little bit harder to assess whether they're counting one way or the other. But in general, I think the number is 5.5. Well, we have had a pretty good young cornerback room, and now we've just added 2 additional corners to it. And I can't believe I'm just discovering this now after the draft, but one of the cool things I found while doing this, because I don't have the same information, or at least I didn't think I had the same information about Nehemiah Pritchet and DJ James as I do the other guys that we'll talk about in the show. But it turns out there's a pretty cool PFF draft guide with a lot of detailed information, and I'll go through some of that with you. So we'll learn a little bit, probably more, about our two new corners. I'm not going to go into the undrafted free agents. I'm not going to go into every corner on the roster. I don't even know if I'm going to really talk about Kobe Bryant. We'll explore it, but I mean, he basically didn't play last year. I'm not exactly sure what he is. I think he is considered more of a safety nowadays, but we will talk about it. So what I thought I would do, and I guess before I do that, I should absolutely acknowledge chat. Good morning to everybody. Good morning, Corey Hickok. Good morning to Hawks fan Matt, man. Good morning, JJ Berenio. Good morning, Jackson Knight. So good morning to everybody, but especially to our YouTube members who are supporting the show. You can join as a YouTube member. The link is in the chat. It's pinned there. It's also in the description of the video. And good morning to Swedish Shinobi. Yes, good morning, everybody. I thought it might be useful just to set the stage with these different guys and go through just some basics of who they are and refresh our memories, at least from last year and kind of where we stand. So in doing that, let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. If you're listening to this pod, you're not going to be able to see. I'll try to describe. I'll read what I'm going to show, but let me share with you all some just quick profiles of the corners on the roster. And if you are a graphic designer and you have issues with my design, I apologize. This was put together very quickly. No template. This is just me throwing things together, so you'll have to put up with it. The spacing bothers me, I got to say. The layout's not quite there. Didn't love the layout, but it's all right. The information's all there. So the first corner I'm going to talk about is Devon Witherspoon, 5th overall pick last year, a guy that was a revelation as soon as he stepped on the field. And part of what I think that's worth talking about with Devon Witherspoon is we don't exactly know what he's gonna be for the Seahawks this year. Everyone assumed he was going to be an outside corner coming into last year. People forget this at this point. They're like, well, he can't be a nickel corner because why would you spend a 5th overall pick on a nickel corner? Well, I always thought, and you can go back and listen, his skill set is remarkably well suited to playing inside. He is an unbelievable blitzer. Great sense for timing. He looked like a Raven. He was all the players we're going to talk about today, he maybe the most looked like he could have played for the Ravens last year and fit in perfectly because those guys, one of the things that stood out about the Ravens defense was how well they disguised blitzes. And I'm not talking about the scheme disguises. I'm talking about the players who were blitzing would not show until right before the snap. And I didn't see any team in football do it better. And I haven't seen any team in football do it better for years. It was really remarkable how good they were at timing their pressure at the snap. And a lot of times it was Kyle Hamilton or non-linebackers coming on those blitzes. And so Devon Witherspoon is in that class of just being able to time up blitzes. We saw it right away when he came onto the scene. And then he's also a physical tackler, one of the hardest hitters, maybe the hardest hitter on the Seahawks last year, even though he's a small guy. And he is great at making plays on the football. So I love him in the middle of the field. I think it's a place where he can cause a lot of havoc. But he is an excellent edge corner. He can be a shutdown edge corner as well, which is incredibly valuable. So He is a guy that I expect to still play maybe a little bit more in the middle of the field, but we don't know. We don't know how Mike McDonald's going to choose to utilize him. And I think as we talk about these different players, remembering who's a nickel player or who has the capability of being a nickel player is an important distinction, because you're going to want to have at least a couple nickel corners on your roster. And Devon Witherspoon clearly is one of the guys that can do that. He is his age, 24, young guy. His contract runs through 2026, but being a first round pick, he will have a 5th-year option. So they can control Devon Witherspoon to be a Seahawk at least through 2027. That's his contract situation. His overall PFF grade last year was 84.1. That ranked among all cornerbacks in football fourth best PFF rank among all cornerbacks in football. His coverage rank, 79.7. That ranked 17th among all cornerbacks in football. His run defense grade was 80.0, and that ranked 13th overall. One of the things that I think stands out about Witherspoon is he's just graded everything. If I put his pass rush rank on there for you, that similarly would be very high. So I'll pull that up here on the side for us, for me to look at. And pretty sure if he was not the top, he was near the top as far as a pass rusher. Pass rush grade. Devon Witherspoon had a 90.8 pass rush grade. That ranked 3rd among all cornerbacks. Number 1, Marlon Humphrey of the Baltimore Ravens. So that's a good one, and one to be aware of. The other thing that stands out with Devon Witherspoon is, he's an excellent tackler. He makes excellent plays on the ball, and just a great overall player. So Devon Witherspoon is, as of now, the best player on your entire roster, offense or defense, coming into this year. One thing I will call out, be a little less glowing about Devon Witherspoon, is after just a rocket ship start to his career. He had a rough first game, but then he played pretty well against Carolina. His grade against New York, 90.9, 83.0 against Cincinnati, 83.3 against Arizona. He was flying. The back half of the year, not as much. He went 56 against Cleveland, 52 against Baltimore. He recovered to 73 against Washington, 83 against the Rams, back down to 72 against the 49ers, 54 against the Cowboys, 87 against the 49ers. So he played against the 49ers quite well, although that was only 7 snaps in his second game against the 49ers. Pittsburgh, I think he was playing hurt, 49.8. And then Arizona, last game of the year, 83.2. So he was a little bit, he wasn't quite the same player in the second half of the year. And I think that's something to monitor. And obviously with his size, that's also just going to be something to pay attention to with Devon Witherspoon. Next player, Tariq Woolen, maybe the most polarizing of the guys that we're going to talk about today. He is 25 years old. He is only a boundary corner. He's not a nickel guy. He will never be a nickel guy. He doesn't profile that way. It would be a misuse of him. So he is an outside corner only. And let me just double check one thing here. Sorry about that. Yeah. So after a really strong rookie year where he had a came up second in Defensive Rookie of the Year, made the Pro Bowl. He had a rougher second year, and he's exclusively a right cornerback. He plays the right side. He is 25 years old. His contract ends in 2025. So he's got a couple more years this year and next on a very affordable deal. And we'll talk about the implications of that. But there's no reason from a contract perspective that there's anything that's in a rush with him, other than if you want to potentially move him. This would be the year to do it if you want to get the maximum return on your investment, although you could debate whether he's really performed his best. So his overall PFF grade is 67.1, and that ranked 55th among all cornerbacks. And that sounds, when you hear fourth as the first one and then 55th, that sounds awful. But remember, there's 32 NFL teams. You could argue that there are 96 starting cornerbacks if you count nickels. So 55th is not bad. Even if you just say that the outside corners, you still get to 64. And I just don't think that that's an awful rank. It's not an exciting one, but it's not awful. His coverage grade, which gets less publicity because people are so focused on the next grade I'll talk about, but his coverage grade is 75 last year. And I think people should realize that's actually an improvement over his coverage grade as a rookie. He was 74.2 as a rookie. He was 75.0 in his second season. So he's essentially the same player as a coverage player. What also might be surprising on the overall grade is he went from 69 as a rookie to 67. So his overall grade did not change that much either. So what did change? His run defense grade was 37.3 last year. That ranked 124th in the NFL. And it's bad. And his tackling has been bad throughout his career. He was a 38.7 graded tackler as a rookie. He was a 38.6 graded tackler as a sophomore, I guess you could call him. And his run defense grade overall as a rookie at least was 49.1. That's not anything to be proud of, but it's not awful. 37.3 as a second-year player is awful. And that really, really hurt the Seahawks. It hurt him. And I think his injury played some role in that. In fact, I want to check one thing here relative to Mr. Oh, come on. Sorry, folks. I got to pull up one thing here on when his injury occurred to make sure I've got the right info to share. And if you are not a Pro Football Reference subscriber, I recommend it. I think it's like $8 a month, and it gets rid of all the ads. Oh, plus you get StatHead, which is a great tool. Anyway, let me find Tariq Woolen. There he is. So he only showed up on the injury report in week 3 last year and missed a game against Carolina with a chest injury. Let me just double check. I thought it was later in the year that happened. But it is worth calling out. So the first, this is interesting. I had to make sure I'm looking at the right guy. But the start of the year last year, Tariq Woolen, his first game had a 72.8 tackling grade and a 67.1 run defense grade. His second game against Detroit, he had a 74.8. He only played 11 snaps. That's when he got hurt. So but in those snaps, he had 5 run defense snaps, and he had a 60.0 run defense grade. Then he came back against the Giants after missing a week. He had a 79.9 tackling grade in that game and a 64.2 run defense grade. Then week 6 against the Bengals, he had a 75.4 tackling grade and a 62.1 run defense grade. So I have to go through this. So through week 6, forgive me while I do this in real time. I think it'll be worth it. I'm doing a lot of Chrome tab machinations here, but I would bet you if we look at grades through week 6 of last season, which is not an insignificant amount of snaps, where would Tariq Woolen rank in tackling? So through 6 weeks of last season, the first 6 weeks, Tariq Woolen ranked 9th in the NFL in tackling among cornerbacks. 9th. That's wild to me. His run defense grade was 68.8, which ranked 33rd in the NFL through the first 6 weeks of last season. So then it just starts to crater. From that point on, he only has 3 games where his tackling grade is above 70 or really above 60. After the Cincinnati game, I don't know if he re-injured himself. I don't know if there's other things that went on, but he fell off a cliff. And if I go through, and I'm just going to do this for the sake of conversation here, but remember, he was 8th in tackling the first 6 weeks. And where did I say he was? 33rd. 8th and 33rd. Remember those 2 numbers, okay? Let's look at from week 7 on. Okay? From week 7 on, where did he rank? This is going to be ugly. So 8th and 33rd. He was 8th in tackling, 33rd in run defense through 6 weeks. PFF is thinking, and it's thinking. I'm giving it a lot to churn through here. But it's going to be low. I think we can safely say it's going to be low. How low? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the lowest among all corners after the 6th week of the season. I think I just made PFF die. It didn't like what I just asked it to do. Let's try one more time. If it doesn't show me, we will figure it out. All right, here we go. So tackling grade. Tackling grade. I'm going to assume. Let me find. There it is. Tariq Woolen. So he went from 8th in the first 6 weeks to 126th from week 7 on. 126th tackling grade. His run defense grade went from 33rd to 127th. Only 5 cornerbacks ranked lower than him in run defense grade after week 7. So I don't know if people just figured something out about him, if he just, from an injury standpoint, couldn't bring it, but he started off the season really well. And I think the injury most likely played a role in that. And we have to see, has he recovered? Can his he's a very long, lean guy. Can his body actually tackle effectively and consistently in the NFL without getting hurt? Richard Sherman miraculously was able to do that. He was also a long, lean guy, and he was able to tackle very physically and effectively. He learned it. He wasn't always that way. He was always willing, but he learned how to do it better as he got older. I think Woolen is a guy who has a reputation, and I can't confirm any of this. This is just rumors that I've heard, of not being the best professional. I don't know how often he is really paying attention in meetings. I don't know how much he is really grinding in the off season. He's a really easygoing, laid back guy, affable. I think everybody likes him. But does he have the intensity to be great at his craft? Or is he just going to rely on these incredible physical gifts that he's got at corner? And he's still learning it. I mean, people forget this is still only, probably 4 or 5 years into being a cornerback. But the way that his 2 seasons stack up, it looks like a guy who's just making it on an immense amount of physical talent. And I'm hoping that he's realizing it's going to take more than that, because there's a lot of other guys that need it and can do it and are putting in time that maybe he's not. So Tariq Woolen is just a fascinating figure for this Seahawks cornerback room. He's got the name recognition. He's got the physical skills. He's certainly got a high ceiling. Is he going to be a good fit for what Mike Macdonald wants to do, both as a run defender and as a professional? This is a guy who I want to see. Is he going to be assignment correct? Is he going to pick up these different schemes with Mike Macdonald? I have that question with him. And if he doesn't, then Tariq Woolen becomes a prime trade candidate. So this is something to watch as we head into camp. I'll be listening to every little nugget. I will pay attention to every bit of body language when Mike Macdonald, when Leslie Frazier, when Aiden Dirty talks about Tariq Woolen. I'm going to be paying attention. This is a big one for everybody. Next on the list, Trey Brown. Trey Brown is next on the list, and we talked to him yesterday. I have to say, my layout of this profile really stinks. Way too much space between the name and the information, but I didn't feel like moving the lockup all around. Sorry. Again, apologies to all design-oriented folks. So Trey Brown is a corner. He's only been an edge corner in the NFL. I did not put him as a slash nickel, but I think it's worth acknowledging that coming into the league, everyone thought he would be a nickel. So I think that there's the potential chance that, Trey Brown could be a nickel. He is not, from an athletic profile perspective, his agility and 3-cone are not quite as good as what you'd really hope for in a nickel. But I think he's got the other parts of the profile to do it and could be an option to slide inside as a nickel. Now, interesting. Sorry, I'm having a technical problem. I think PFF does not expect anyone to be using it at 8 a.m. in the off season on a Friday, but I'm here using it and I want it to work. Yeah. Anyway, here he is 27 years old, so a little bit older than the other two, and his contract ends this year. All right. This is the final year of his deal, of his rookie deal. His overall grade last year was 62.8. That ranked 76th among cornerbacks. And as I remind you, you could argue that there are 96 starting corners in the NFL. So 76 is kind of in the bottom third. His coverage grade was 64.1. That ranked 71st among corners. His run defense grade was 64. That ranked 61st. So what Trey Brown, just from a stats perspective, is as a corner is a slightly above average starter. That's how he ranked. One of the things I'm trying to get, but I can't, well, maybe I can find it here without having to go to a refresh screen. Trey Brown, I believe, had a significant number of penalties. Well, I know he had 9 penalties, and I think that hurts his grade. Yeah, so Tariq Woolen also had 9 penalties. As a comparison, Devon Witherspoon had 5 penalties. So pretty much double what Devon Witherspoon had. Why does this matter? Well, those penalties affect your grade. So I think Trey Brown, from a coverage perspective, he's so tight in coverage all the time. He's almost never beaten clearly. And some of those are turning into penalties. If he can clean that up, I think his coverage grade easily is in the 70s. Like, no question. I think it's in the mid to high 70s if he cuts down on some of those penalties. From a actual, looking at the hard numbers perspective, he had 5 pass breakups compared to 10 for both Tariq Woolen and Devon Witherspoon. He was targeted less often, though, 47 times versus 66 for Woolen and 68 for Witherspoon. In those 47 targets, he had 2 picks. He gave up 3 touchdowns, which, by the way, that was the same amount that Tariq Woolen gave up and one fewer than what Devon Witherspoon gave up. Devon Witherspoon gave up 4 touchdowns. But he had 5 pass breakups, which is half of what they had. So, it's fewer pass breakups, but in fewer targets. And I think that the targets matter because if you are not targeted, you don't have an opportunity to make a pass breakup, obviously, or an interception. But it also implies that you are forcing the quarterback to go to different reads. I'm taking a look if there's anything else here that's of note with Trey Brown, but I think that's the highlights. I was trying to find a couple other pieces. He he primarily played left corner last year for the Seahawks. All right. Did this? Yeah. Oh, there we go. All right. Finally, it loaded. Trey Brown in general I think one other thing to note is he only pass rushed a couple of times, but he had an 80.5 pass rush grade. So I think this is another player who has the potential to be part of your blitz packages from the corner position. And I think that that's also a reason to consider that he might be a guy that could play inside. I was going to check to see real quick. As far as missed tackle rates go, Trey Brown missed 17% of his tackle attempts. Devon Witherspoon only missed 12. Tariq Woolen missed 20. 1 out of every 5 tackles last year was a missed tackle for Tariq Woolen. Okay. All right. Let's keep pressing on here. Next, this guy is the secret weapon that people just forget about, but I don't. His name is memorable, is Michael Jackson, and this guy is a badass. He is 6'1", 210 pounds. He is the biggest corner on your roster by a decent amount. He is 27 years old. He is exclusively an edge corner. And I have questions about whether they would look at him at safety because I think he would be interesting there. But in general, he's been an edge corner. And he started last year on the bench. He was beaten out by Trey Brown. He had a great training camp, but then had an awful preseason. And Trey Brown was just a better player. But he eventually got back into the lineup. Michael Jackson's 27. His contract also ends this year. So he is the same age as Trey Brown. He looks older, but he's the same age. His overall PFF grade last year was 77.0. That ranked 21st among all corners. Pretty dang good. His coverage grade ranked 76.9. Oh, sorry, it was 76.9. It ranked 21st. His run defense grade, 71.5. That ranked 32nd. So what you have in Mike Jackson is an incredibly physical corner who ranked near the top in just about every category you'd want him to. He had a few pass rush snaps and he wasn't great there. His tackling, interestingly, his tackling is not so great. At least it wasn't last year. He had a 60.1 tackling grade. So Trey Brown had a better tackling grade. But he, in, only 474 snaps, was a pretty good player for the Seahawks. Now, it's worth calling out the year before when he played almost 1,200 snaps. His overall grade was 58.4. So he went from 58 to 77, but half the amount of snaps, less than half the amount of snaps. So who knows, if you had to really rely on Mike Jackson, is he going to be able to put up these numbers? He has not proven that he can put up these numbers if he's out there all the time. That's my question with Mike Jackson is, physically, is he capable of sticking with enough receivers, different types of receivers, that he can be a consistently good corner for you? He is a dog. He absolutely brings the intensity, the physicality. I think he's a professional. I think he prepares. I think he's got everything else that you want. But there's times where it just seems like he is overmatched from a twitch and lateral agility perspective. But you cannot argue, like, the film that he put out last year when he was put in to get starter snaps was pretty good. I will say some of these numbers are a little bit misleading, or at least they're worth a little bit more explanation. Mike Jackson really played as a starter the last 4 games of last season. Against Philadelphia, he had an 88.0 grade and a 90.6 coverage grade, which is elite. I mean, just elite. And that really helps his overall grade. He then was 71.6 against Tennessee with a 68.1 coverage grade. And then against Pittsburgh, he was 52.7 with a 51.9 coverage grade. And in the last game of the year, he was 60.8 with 54.5 coverage grade. So only one of those 4 games as a full starter last year was above 70. But it was such a good game that it really raised his overall numbers. And sorry, he had 2 games above 70, but only 1 game above 70 as in coverage, if I didn't make that clear. Where he's consistent is run defense. Every time he plays, he's going to be a 60 or better run defender. He's a good run defender. He's a good tackler in general, I think. He had a couple really bad games tackling. One against Pittsburgh, he had 29.2 grade. San Francisco, he had 29.3. He missed a third of his tackles in both of those games, which is clearly not good. But this is the question with Mike Jackson. These grades look sparkling that I've got up for you to see. I'm not sure if you put him out there as a starter, I'm just not sure this guy can hold up for you and be a good corner. I have more confidence in Trey Brown as a cover corner than I do of Mike Jackson. But I just love so much about Mike Jackson. I want to find a place for him on this team. And I think about safety and I'm just like, why not? In fact, let me go take a quick look. Let's look at Raz for Mike Jackson. See if they've got, it's amazing what Kentley Platte has for Raz over there. While that's loading, I'm going to look up mock draftable. Let me see if I can find Michael Jackson. Doesn't look like it. Mike Jackson. Cool. All right. So Mike Jackson, 6'1.5", 210 pounds, 77 and a quarter inch wingspan. All that's great. Arm length, 32.5. Great. 40-yard dash, 4.45. I didn't know he ran a 4.4. That's pretty impressive. Vertical, 40.5-inch vert. That's great. But where he loses 3-cone drill, 7, he was a 15th percentile 3-cone guy. And interesting, like his comparables are like Patrick Surtain, Christian Gonzalez, Jalen Ramsey. Those are the physical comparables, which makes some sense. I would love to be able to see as a safety who he compares with, if there's somebody. Let me see if Raz is ready for me. Okay. Mike Jackson. Oh, they'll probably have him as Michael in the database. By the way, this is how my brain works. I just go from thing to thing and explore where it takes me. So hopefully you're able to follow along here. Mike Jackson had an 88th percentile RAS score as a cornerback, but I want to see him as a safety. So let me change this as a strong safety and change position. So he's similarly 88th percentile as a strong safety. His explosion grade's elite. His size grade's good. Speed grade's good. Agility grade's good. Interestingly, his agility grade's just okay as a corner, but it's good as a safety. So I don't know. I just something about Mike Jack. I'd love to see them find a place and see what this is. One of the guys I'm very interested to see what Mike McDonald wants to do with him, because he's the kind of player you want on your defense. He sets a tone. So we'll see. This is one of the players I'm fascinated to see, and he gets less conversation than he really deserves. All right, next guy on the list. Hey, you didn't expect to see this name, did you? Arty Burns. Arty Burns. Yes, he belongs on this list. He played for the Seahawks last year. He is a guy, part of the reason he's on this list is he's the only other guy that has really logged nickel snaps. And everyone talks about him as a vet. He's only 29. It's not like he's old, but he is older than the guys that they've got. They've got 24 and 25 and 27-year-olds. So yeah, he's a couple years older than Mike Jackson and Trey Brown. He's I was surprised that they re-signed him. I got to say, I was surprised, but they did. And I think that part of the reason is it gives them flexibility on where they can play Devon Witherspoon, because Burns can come in and play nickel corner. And as we look through his kind of grades and information, start with his overall grade, which was 66.5, solidly above average as a starter. That ranked 59th among corners. His coverage grade, 66.6. That ranked 60th. His run defense, 65.4. That ranked 52nd. So what do you have here? You have a solid starting player that is not going to hurt you in any aspect of the game. And I think that that's worth calling out, that Arty Burns is not some journeyman back end of the roster, fodder to just stick on the team. I think he's a quality player that can come in and play for you at the corner position. He can also play some safety. He played a few snaps of safety last year, but in general, he has moved into being your nickel corner. And as I talked about some of the different stats for these guys, let's go into Arty Burns, kind of his coverage information here. He only had one penalty last year. Now, he had much fewer snaps, but still was able to do this. Part of the reason his coverage grade is as good as it is because he's not getting penalties. He's a little bit more savvy that way. He was only targeted 24 times, but he gave up 9.6 yards per reception, which is, right there with Tariq Woolen as lowest on the team. People really sleep. Tariq, he would have games where he'd give up a few catches and people would be all over him, but they'd all be short. No one's getting behind him. And that's a really big deal for any edge corner. Arty only had one pass breakup in those 24 attempts his direction. He did not give up a touchdown. He did not have an interception. Arty Burns is a guy that I think is going to be challenged by some of the other guys on the roster that are rookies, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think he bears mentioning as a guy that could have a place for the Seahawks. He is a talented enough player that I would not count him out. Next, Nehemiah Pritchet. So I was going to put in some of his college grades and then realized, you know what? I found something better. So we're going to do this. I'm going to switch this up. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second to get the right screen in place. While I do this, it is a good time. It's a good time to click like and subscribe on the video, folks. Come on. You know you want to. And oops, that is ugly. There we go. And if you haven't already, sign up patreon.com/hawkblogger, get all the audio versions of this pod, as well as access to the Slack channel. And then join as a YouTube member. It is easy. It is quick. It is a great way to support the show. And I really appreciate all the folks that are doing it. All right. Let's get into this next piece here. I wish this... so ugly. All right. I'm going to show you something I have not shown before, and I haven't looked at it until this morning. So we're going to look at this together, but we're going to learn a little bit about our new corners. Through this PFF draft guide. And I will zoom in a little bit so you all can kind of see this along with me. The thing I wanted to show with Nehemiah Pritchet were some of this 3-year data from PFF. So his PFF grade was not so great 2021, but improved from 55.4 to 70.6 in 2022, and then 71.2 in 2023. So not a big jump after his second year, but relatively okay. His coverage snaps dipped a little bit. He gave up pretty good completion rate. I mean, under 50% is really good for any corner. That is much better. To give you a comparison, Devon Witherspoon gave up 57% completion rate as a rookie, and that was the best among the Seahawks cornerbacks. Everyone else given up, 70%, 62%, that kind of stuff, 63%. So 46% is pretty remarkable. He only gave up one touchdown. He did have one pick. And I think one of the issues with Nehemiah Pritchet I've heard is just not a great player at making plays on the ball. Talks about here that stable metrics tend to be more predictive of future success than unstable metrics. The most stable facets of quarterback play are those with the biggest sample sizes, blah, blah, blah. All right. So these are stable metrics for Nehemiah Pritchet. His coverage graded outside cornerback, 94th percentile. His forced incompletion rate, 93rd percentile. His coverage grade when the time to throw is greater than 3 seconds is 98th percentile. What does that mean? That means how sticky are you? Are you covering past the normal amount of time, or can you only cover if the pass rush is getting home? So 98th percentile is pretty dang good. His coverage grade versus a clean pocket, so this is when the quarterback's not under pressure and can take their time, is 88th percentile. His coverage grade in single coverage, 88th percentile. His coverage grade at slot cornerback is 73rd percentile. I don't know why he's slot cornerback, but I didn't think he played any slot cornerback. Advanced data. Now, this is not as rosy. Forced incompletions. He only had 5 forced incompletions, which ranked 217th in 2023. His percentage of forced incompletions was 19.2, which ranked 84th. That's better, and probably a better number to look at, because the number of incompletions only is a factor based on how many times people threw the ball your way. So the percentage is a better gauge, but 84th is still not the highest. Missed tackle percentage, 17.2%. That ranked 328th. This guy has the Tariq Woolen build. Tall, slender, incredibly fast. Is he going to physically be able to stand up? This is a question with Nehemiah Pritchet. Press coverage snaps. 90, tied for 146. His man snaps, he didn't have a lot of those. I'm just scrolling through these, see if there's anything else that's of interest here. Pre-draft percentile rank. Yep, his hand size is quite small. His hand size is tiny. Holy moly. 8.3. I mean, normal size hands are going to be over 9 for sure, and often are going to be closer to 10. His are in the 3rd percentile. Man, those are no wonder he's not intercepting the ball more often. His 40-yard dash is, clearly toward the best at 4.36. His vertical jump at 42 is near the best. Broad. So he's got some of those pieces. So that's Nehemiah Pritchet. All right. Now let me find DJ James. See if it finds it, or do I have to add periods? I thought that was interesting. I wish I would have known that before. And no, it did not find DJ James, so I'm gonna have to put periods. All right, hold on. And I see someone saying we're in the weeds now. You know what, folks? If you want superficial if you want superficial coverage, uh there's plenty of places to get it. I'm going to get into the weeds for sure. Because I think this is where the interesting stuff lies. All right, so DJ James, I'm not going to look at the strengths and weaknesses. Let's look at his 3-year data. So he was a 71.6 his first year, 2021, then 82.3, and then 83.9. So he started where Nehemiah Pritchet ended in terms of PFF grade and was a much higher graded player in college. Got more snaps, but he gave up higher completion rate. So he gave up a 61.5 completion rate last year. Year before it was 40.7, which is really, really good. 61.5 is not terrible, but it's not great. He gave up 3 touchdowns. Not great. He had a couple picks. So he's had at least a pick every year, where Nehemiah Pritchet's not a guy that's done that. Now, we look at the stable metrics. These are wild. His coverage grade is an outside corner, 100th percentile. Forced incompletion rate, 97th percentile. Coverage grade when time to throw is greater than 3 seconds, 98th percentile. Coverage grade versus clean pocket, 100th percentile. Coverage grade in single coverage, 100th percentile. Coverage grade at slot corner, 98th percentile. I almost like, is this real? Because he's covering the whole graph. That is crazy if that's right. So let's keep going. There's got to be something here to make this less. I mean, this is like all world percentile ranks. His forced incompletions, 15. He tied for 9th in the entire FBS in forced incompletion. His forced incompletion percentage at 28.9, 13th. These are really, really good numbers. His average target depth doesn't matter. Coverage stops, 13, tied for 17th in the nation. Missed tackle rate at 13.7 was 218th. Not great. Better than Nehemiah Pritchet. And then if we look at where he got snaps, he got 32 snaps as a nickel corner, as a slot corner, 605 as a wide corner. So he mostly got his snaps as a wide corner, which I think we knew. And this is where I think some of what dropped him. He also has very small hands. Almost wild. Like, I got to look up a couple other guys. Let me do a quick thing here, because I'm almost can't believe what I'm looking at here for DJ James. It's too good. It's too good. Let's go to mock draftable. DJ James, cornerback, Auburn. Yeah, 8 3/8 inch hand size, 5th percentile. Why are these guys from Auburn having the tiniest hands you ever heard of? I mean, those are tiny. His arm length is also small. That is 34th percentile at 31 inches. His weight at 175 is 2nd percentile. So this is probably part of the concern, these small corners. But I think DJ James is a pretty interesting nickel prospect. He's 6 foot, which is taller than most. 175. I don't see him having any agility grades. Let's see if in RAS, we have a RAS score for him. We do. No. Do we? I don't know if we do. That doesn't make sense. Let me Let me look up Auburn. 1 second, guys. I really want to make sure I get all the information here because I'm curious. DJ James. There we go. Got it. I knew I could find it. All right. Okay. He does have agility grades, and they're not good. This is why he dropped. His shuttle was 441, which was 23rd percentile. His 3 cone was 728. That is 19th percentile. That is not a good profile for a slot corner. Agility, lateral quickness, this is a huge part because unlike outside corner where you've got the boundary as a defender where you can just use the sideline to keep people know that they're not going to go that direction, when they're playing in the slot, they can go any which way, and you've got to be able to cover any which way. So technique on the outside, a lot of times you're pressing them into the boundary, and you've got that as a default, but in the interior, you've got to be able to have a two-way potential go. Now, you might funnel them. Still, you don't have to necessarily just say, we're going to let you go any way you want. You can jump to one side and force them to, with leverage, go one way or the other. And so depending on how smart you are, I mean, you can maybe make up for some of the lack of lateral agility, but there are going to be some situations where you still just have to be able to flip your hips and change direction in a way that you won't on the outside. So I think the lateral agility is the question mark for DJ James. And I thought that was interesting to kind of hear about our new 2 Auburn cornerbacks, some stuff that I hadn't heard before. DJ James gives me a little bit of the Kobe Bryant feel. And I don't mean, I think I'm going to look back at Kobe Bryant's numbers. I think Kobe Bryant's not the athlete that DJ James is. But I get a little bit of that feel. And yes, Kobe Bryant also had 35th percentile shuttle, 13th percentile 3 cone. His speed grade is much worse. His speed grade 4.54 40, 53rd percentile. DJ James 4.42 40 is 90th percentile. So DJ James is like a faster version of Kobe Bryant, but he is not particularly agile. I mean, they are very similar agility wise, very poor. And we'll have to see how that translates. So you've got now, as we went through it, 2 23-year-olds in DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchet, who you've got under club control till 2027 if you want them. You've got Arty Burns, Michael Jackson, and Trey Brown, who are all 27 years old. Sorry, they are all in the last year of their deal. That's what I wanted to say. Let's try that again. Arty Burns, Michael Jackson, Trey Brown are in the last year of their deals. Arty Burns is the oldest player in the cornerback room, and he's just 29, which is not that old. Trey Brown and Michael Jackson are 27. The 2 guys that you assume are the building blocks, the pillars of this room, are Devon Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen. Devon Witherspoon's 24, Tariq Woolen's 25. They both made a Pro Bowl as a rookie. Tariq Woolen has got to solve this tackling and run defense issue. I think he also has to solve this penalty issue. He had a lot of hands to the face penalties. he would have a much higher grade. I think he would be into the 80s as a coverage player, like probably the mid 80s as a coverage player. He would maybe have the highest grade as a coverage player on the team if he could cut down on those penalties. If he's not a fit for Mike Macdonald, I think he becomes a trade candidate, and it opens up a place. This is where Nehemiah Pritchet, if he can show out and he looks like a guy that they like, he could potentially slide in and take that over. You also have the potential to say, you know what? Trey Brown, even if he just plays like he played last year, will not be super expensive on the free agent market. Maybe they're better off with Trey Brown, Devon Witherspoon, and one of these other guys. And Tariq Woolen can be a trade piece to get something else. I think it would be ideal if Tariq Woolen could have a solid year before that happens in order to increase his trade value. But I think he's a pretty valuable player still. He just has some limits in tackling. Where it comes down to, for me, a real question that we talked about this before is Trey Brown versus Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's a guy that had better PFF grades last year, but as I talked to you about, there's a little bit of a mirage there. Over 4 games, for 3 of them, he was not all that great. One of them, he was fantastic. And Trey Brown is a guy that I think is much steadier. And really for him, it's just the penalties. If you can cut those down, I think you've got a guy that is really going to thrive. And I think, if I'm being honest, if I was to rank all of these players based off who I think is going to excel under a Mike Macdonald defense, Devon Witherspoon is easily first. I think Trey Brown might be second. Smart guy, understands the position, understands and studies his opponent. I think he will put into practice what Mike Macdonald wants to see, as good or better than maybe he might be the best of all these guys at doing it the way it's coached. And I think that's something that is going to be increasingly important. As much as Pete let guys be who they were, I think attention to detail suffered under Pete in his final few years. So I think that's going to be a much higher weighted aspect of a player's performance, is attention to detail. I think Trey Brown, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be one of those guys. Maybe the best. But generally speaking, I think Devon Witherspoon is going to thrive. I think Trey Brown is second on my list. I think Mike Jackson might be third above Tariq Woolen, because I think it depends on how they use him, but they're going to ask their corners to be able to step up as a tackler, step up physically, maybe blitz on occasion. I think Mike Jackson is a guy that maybe has some limits in coverage and physically, but I think also has traits that are going to be really appealing to Mike Macdonald. And then I get to Tariq Woolen just because I'm curious how they utilize him. But I think it's interesting they picked Nehemiah Pritchet, who in a lot of ways just profiles as a similar player to Tariq Woolen. Long, lanky, fast. The difference is Woolen has a receiver background and has good hands. Pritchet has the smallest hands I've ever seen. He and DJ James have tiny, tiny hands, and is not good at breaking up passes and making plays on the ball. So Woolen is more valuable because he can take the ball away. Pritchet might be, I think, if you're lucky, I think Nehemiah Pritchet is a decent outside cover corner. I'm not sure that you see him truly as a starter. I'm not sure I see that from his profile. DJ James is an interesting one at nickel. And one of the things that could be really cool here is they could get some flexibility between Trey Brown, Devon Witherspoon, and DJ James at the nickel position. I think each of those guys could play nickel. And if you had all three of those, all those guys can also, I think, play outside. DJ James, even though we talked about him as a nickel, almost all of his snaps in college were outside. Trey Brown, almost all of his snaps, other than like 10 snaps last year, were outside. Witherspoon has played both. We already have seen that. But if you have those guys that any one of them could play nickel and any one of them could play outside, I don't know if I've ever seen a team that has that kind of disguise flexibility on any given snap or any given game. And I don't think the Seahawks have really had that potential before. Arty Burns probably fits into that mold as well. He is more focused at nickel, but he's definitely played outside corner plenty. So you've got a few guys now where you've got flexibility. Tariq Woolen will never play nickel. He should never play nickel. Nehemiah Pritchet will never play nickel, and he should never play nickel. Michael Jackson, I think, would be interesting there, but it's a different way. I think he's more of a safety than I don't think he is a nickel in that same way. So I don't know how to project this group to finish. I went through with all of you 7 corners. Devon Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Trey Brown, Michael Jackson, Arty Burns, Nehemiah Pritchet, and DJ James. I told you at the beginning that they keep, on average, 5.5. So either 5 or 6. If they keep 6, then one of these guys is off. If they keep 5, 2 of these guys are off the roster. If I had to bet right now, oldest probably is least likely, Arty Burns, just a guess. And then one of the rookies. I wonder if, given what I've seen, I would put my money on DJ James over Nehemiah Pritchet. Nehemiah Pritchet might be a guy that they put on the practice squad, something along those lines. We would see there. But the challenge is when you've got Trey Brown, Michael Jackson, and Arty Burns on the last year of their deal, keeping those 3 or 2 of those 3 puts you in a position where you might be exposing a guy like one of your rookies, if they show any promise, that could get signed by another team and you lose club control. The benefit of drafting those guys is you could have them for 4 years on very cheap contracts. So if they turn out to be good players, you've got a really big value. The other wild card here is if any of these players end up being safeties. Michael Jackson is the one that jumps out to me. I'm curious if he'll get any safety snaps. Arty Burns has had some safety snaps. I did not talk about Kobe Bryant. And he has obviously played nickel as a rookie, but he played almost exclusively as safety last year. And I don't know if there's really a reason for them to bring him in as a nickel this year. I would assume that they're going to stick with him at safety, but we'll see. Who knows in this new situation? But if Mike Jackson converts to safety, that opens up a spot. And personally, I think that's the thing I'm most interested in, would want to see, because I'm not convinced that Mike Jackson has true starter, above average starter upside at corner. I really like him as a player. I was one of the first to be on him. You could go back to the year he came in the Seahawks last couple games of the season 2 years ago, and I was like, who is this guy? He's making great plays on the ball. He's rugged, he's tough, he's mean, he brings the attitude. Like, I love so much about him. But if I'm being honest, when I watch him play outside corner, he gets left more often than I'd like. And so we'll see. We'll see. I would love to see him. I think he could be ending up being a really good safety and maybe just an okay corner. And so I'd love to see them put him at safety. And there's just these big wild cards, which are Tariq Woolen has so much talent, and I don't think that he's really worked to accentuate it and amplify it, maximize it in his first 2 years. If the coaches can unlock that, if he can change himself to being a higher quality professional, Tariq Woolen's got more physical skills than almost any cornerback in football and almost any cornerback that's ever played football. So that's where, we have to see and have to hope. We heard from Trey Brown yesterday. The cornerback room is tight. He also alluded to the fact that they went through some things last year and that I didn't ask him about it. In retrospect, I should have, but I'm not really aware of anything that they went through last year. And I'm curious what that was. And he talked about them being tight this year. That implied in some ways that they weren't as tight last year. Really wanting to see what comes of that and what we see from that group. The downside of being a young cornerback room is you don't have someone in there who's really setting the standard for how you act as a professional, how you act as a teammate, or anything else. So that is one of the questions I have for that group. All right. We're going to wrap there. Hopefully folks found that useful to go through the cornerback room. I certainly did. And it was just a good reset about how they're going to approach this position this year. One of the potential best positions on the roster that can be a great position for a number of years if some of these guys really blossom, and maybe the place where there'll be some overflow that the Seahawks can turn into either additional picks next year or players. And we will find that out together here as OTAs and mini camps and other things roll on. All right, folks, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. Please make sure you sign up as a YouTube member. The link is in the chat. It's also in the description of the video. And become a Patreon member, patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up there, get access to the Slack channel and all the audio versions of this. So take care. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been another edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings.